All right, the next thing we're going to work on here is the environment that this house is going to sit on. Now you'll notice that my reference is a little bit different. I'm just kind of using multiples of these to kind of get inspiration. But I do want it to kind of be something like this where it's just sitting on a little island and sort of like there's just like water, calm water around it, and maybe the backdrop of like a starry sky or something like that. So like a lot of these with the clouds in the background. But I do want it to be kind of self-contained in its own little environment. So I think something like this is probably what I'm going to aim for. I may do like stairs or something. So I may have like a little path coming from the door down to like some stairs. But I think this is kind of the goal that I'm shooting for, something similar to this with some grass and trees and stuff like that. So the first thing I want to do to get started with that is to make a little platform or ground mesh to sort of hold all of these things. So I'm just going to do that with a cube. So I'm just going to create a cube to start with and make it, you know, as big as I could possibly need it to be. And I definitely want it to be like centered on my house here. And may even need to make it a little bigger than you plan for, right? So like if we're looking at the width of this house, probably almost the whole width of it away from the house is about the size of it. So that's kind of the size I'm trying to go for. Nothing too big, but also nothing too small. So it may be something that I just kind of fiddle with as I go. And so we're just going to move that down into place. I'm going to add a couple divisions here. Maybe something like that. And I don't need any height divisions, so I'm going to take that off. So that's looking pretty good. Then I'm going to delete the bottom. Again, we're not going to see the bottom, so there's no point in having that geometry there. So I'm just going to delete the bottom. Oops, don't want to delete those. And then I'm going to hit it with a smooth function. So I'm going to just grab that, and then I'm going to come up here to my smooth function, which is, let's see, may not have it in my shelf here, even though it is a tool that I use quite a bit. So let's just jump over to poly modeling, and we have somewhere in here. That's reduce. We want the opposite of reduce. Either I'm blind or I'm just not seeing it. So it's also going to be under mesh, edit mesh. Smooth. So it's that function right there. So it's there. It looks like they just changed the icon. So that's my mistake. But yeah, they just changed the icon. So I'm just going to hit it with this smooth function. And basically what that's going to do is just subdivide the geometry. So I'm going to do 2 divisions for that. And then what I'm going to do is grab my sculpt tool, which you can find under sculpting, or I have one in my mega shelf here. And the way the sculpt tool works is you have a brush. You can change your brush size by holding down the B key. And I just typically use the grab tool. That's generally the only tool that I really use. And then you can kind of just, just sculpt and move things around. So I want this to be a little bit more square than, or a little bit more circular than what it is by default. If you hold down shift, you can smooth, but I do want it to look organic. I want the top of it to be fairly flat, but I do want it to have more of an organic look, more of like an island look to it. And again, I think I'm going to pull out a little bit here and make like a little nook of where some stairs can go. It doesn't have to be perfect. And again, you can hit it with, hold down shift to hit it with smooth. And I can edit this later. This does not need to be the final steps. So do not worry about doing anything that you don't like. You can always edit it, remove it. And I want to make sure that this comes far enough down to where it will be hidden by the water that we're eventually going to have. And I will have some rocks along the edge here as well. So again, I don't want it to look square, so I kind of want to hide any corners that may be visible. And then I may even just shrink it down a little bit more, make it a tad bit smaller than it is there. All right, and then we can go ahead and name this ground. That's a simple name for it there. You could go ahead and add a shader to this if you want. I think I might go ahead and just do that just to kind of make it a little bit cooler to look at. I do want to, as always, I want to keep things clean by deleting the history, freezing the transforms. And then I'll go down to assign new material, standard surface. We'll go ahead and name this ground SS for ground standard surface. And I'm just going to make it sort of like a very subdued green that is not shiny at all. So we're going to increase the roughness quite a bit. And just get something like that. I do want to make sure that it's all got smooth normals. So come up to mesh display and soften all my normals just in case there may be any hard normals there. I do want to do that. Let's see, let's maybe rotate it. Again, this is something we can futz around with for days and days. So this does not have to be the final iteration of your little plot of land at this point, but I'm just trying to get it close to what I'm kind of aiming for. So the next thing I want to do here is maybe populate some rocks around the edge. And this is something we're going to once again do with mesh. But this time we're actually going to keep it as a mesh object so we can edit it and maybe play around with it as we're working. So unlike the mesh we've done in the past where we've kind of used mesh to distribute the shape of things and then we deleted it and turned it back into regular objects, so not mesh objects. Now we're getting into the realm of using mesh in its non-destructive form, so we can actually edit things and manipulate things as we go. Now I already have some rocks made here. I do want to walk you through how I made those rocks. It's actually pretty simple the way that I kind of figured out a cool way to make some rocks. And basically what you're going to use is if you go to create polygon primitives, and I choose this platonic solid option, and then I make sure that my primitive is set to dodecahedron. and hit create. And what that's going to give us is almost like this soccer ball looking thing. Right, so that doesn't really look much like a rock as it stands. But then once we take our sculpt tool once again and start sort of grabbing and moving things around and shaping it out a little bit, it will start to look a little bit more rock-like. And now here's the really cool thing about these platonic solids is because of the way that the sort of geometry is, it helps us get those like faceted faces. So you'll notice that a lot of these rocks here have sort of like a faceted face, almost like a gem or a crystal or something. So what we can do with this rock now is we can bevel it. So I'm just going to hit it with a quick bevel. Maybe drop the fraction down and increase my segments a little bit. And now we get these facets all over the place. So now it's kind of looking a little bit more like a gem or a crystal. But then what I can do is hit it once more with my sculpt tool, holding down shift, just to kind of smooth things out. Just very lightly tapping it here and there to smooth stuff. And then you'll get something that looks a little bit more like a natural rock, right? Where some of it's round and smooth, and then some of it has these really sharp, faceted faces. You know, you can continue to edit that. Again, you can change your brush size just by holding down the B key. And we're smoothing it just by hitting it with our shift. So then you get these rocks that look, you know, fairly neat, because they have these sort of smooth surfaces and hard-edged corners, hard surfaces. So a really quick, easy way to get some stylized looking rocks with very little effort. And it's kind of hard to mess up. Like once you get started and just play around with it, you can make 5 or 6 very different looking rocks very quickly using this method. So I have some rocks already made here. So I have 4 of them. So we're going to go ahead and just select this first guy here and create our mesh network. And then I'm going to grab my distribute and change this to mesh and input my ground plane as usual, just as we've been doing. And then we can kind of increase the values there. Now, if you want to have some random rocks scattered around your scene in a small form, you can do this as well. But what we want is to have them mainly just around the edge. So it's kind of like this rocky outcropping all the way around the island. So, so I'm going to actually take my number of points all the way down here in my distribute. Actually, before we do that, let's get our other rocks inputted just in a way that we can see them. So we'll go to our repro node, and I'm going to plug in rock 2, rock 3, and rock 4. And then we can go ahead and just hide those for now. And then we're going to add an ID node as usual, so we can kind of see the different rocks there. So now we have all these different rocks. So what I'm going to use, instead of just the general scattering rocks around my scene, we're going to go to distribute and drop down those number of rocks. Again, if you want some random rocks here just in your scene, you can do this. This isn't going to affect what we're going to do next. So we could go ahead and create a random node, and you generally don't want to mess with the random position too much, but we'll mess with a little bit. The rotates for these, we can just max out all the rotates for these rocks. And then we're going to do uniform scale. We can even do ununiform scale And that way we get some long ones and we get them all sort of scaled out differently like that. So now we have some of these long thin ones and some larger ones. So if you just want to distribute rocks throughout your entire island like this, you can use that method. We're going to do something a little bit different. So I'm going to come back to my distribute and just drop down my numbers to 0. And what we're going to do is use a placer. I think that's what it's called, placer. Yeah, so we're going to go to Mash, and I'm going to activate or make a placer node. And then basically we have some brushes here that we can use. So I can have this plus brush. Again, we're going to change our size by holding down the B key. And we can change our brush size here. And then basically I can just paint right on that surface, right? But you'll notice a few things right off the bat, that even though we set up that the ID node and everything, we're not getting different rocks here. So I need to change some settings here in my my placer node. So I do want to turn scatter on, so they scatter. I'm going to turn collide. We'll leave it off for now. We'll see how that looks. Random scale, we'll mess around with that a little bit. Random rotation. But mainly the first thing we want to do is turn our ID mode from fixed to random. And then basically what this is our starting ID node and our ending ID node. So our starting ID node is 0. And we can go back and look at this in our repro here, right? So 0 through 3. So we have 4 nodes and they start with 0. So if I jump back over here to my placer and I leave this one 0 and change this one to 3, we're going to get all 4 of those rocks just randomly placed throughout my my island when we kind of paint them on. So let's go back to the placer node, choose the add brush. Sometimes you have to click that twice for some reason. And now we're getting all of those different rocks. Random rotation, again, we can go crazy with this because we want all different sides of those rocks to show up. Your random scale, this is 1 to whatever you want. So if I want them to be up to double in size, I'll change this from a value of 1 to a value of 2. If I want them to be triple in size, I can do a value of 1 to a value of 3. And then we'll see that we get sort of like just some random rocks here. So I actually want these to be quite a bit bigger. So I'm going to do my smallest, we'll do at a value of 2. And my largest, we want a value of 6. And we'll see what that looks like when we paint. So that doesn't look too bad. We can change our brush size. If we do a bigger brush size, we'll get a slightly different result. We'll see that they're spread out a lot more. Right? In which case I could probably increase my size a little bit more. So let's do 8. Let's do 3 to 8. And so, yeah, now I can basically just sort of paint rocks along this edge here. All the way around. It's a really neat way to sort of place your rocks all the way around at a very random way. Now you may do this and realize that, well, now with the rocks there, my island looks a little bit too small, right? I like all the rocks there, but now my island just looks too small. So you may want to increase that. You also have some other options here. So we do have a delete. So if I want to clear out this area of rocks, I can just go to my delete brush and kind of delete those rocks. I can paint those back in if I want. I can also nudge, so I have a nudge option. So I can start to just sort of nudge those around. If I feel like some of them are a little bit too close to the top. Sometimes you may have them sort of just mess up on you like this, but you can just nudge them back into place. And you have an ID as well. So if you want to paint a specific rock, you can paint that specific rock. So say I just want to do rock 2, I can change my paint ID to 2. And now when I paint, make my brush size a little smaller. Should only be painting rock 2 now. Doesn't seem to be working for me, but that's basically what that does. We also have a move and rotate tool. Now I'm not quite sure how this works. I'm assuming this lets you select a rock and move that individual rock. So that's a pretty cool feature as well. So if you have some rocks that are kind of in the way, you can move and rotate them. So you can really get some custom looks with these. We may even be able to select a rock and delete it. So like say I don't want that rock. Nope, don't want to do that. So that just deletes the whole thing. But you know, if there's any areas that you don't really like, you can always just come in and use your delete brush and then just delete those rocks. Now obviously you can see that my system is kind of chugging here. Right? Struggling a little bit. So what I want to start to do here with my scene is putting things in display layers. And this will, over time, just make things a bit easier for me to work with. So I'm just going to delete all of these. So I want to put some things in display layers. So we're going to go over to our channel box and I'm going to create some new display layers. So what I can do is say, take my shingles, boards, end caps, porch. Actually might leave the porch separately. Bricks, chimney bricks, top shingles. We can take all of these things. We'll also do the windows and the window glass and the grunge, right? So we can take all of these things and put them in a display layer. So now whenever I don't want to see them, I can just very easily turn them all off and on without needing to go and Control H or hide them all individually. So that's in my channel box here. all the way down at the bottom, display, and I'm going to click this button right here. And what this will do is create a new display layer and add the objects that I have selected to that display layer. So I can create that. Not a lot is going to happen. Doesn't look like anything really happened there. But now if I click that V for visibility, it turns off all of those layers or all of those objects, and now you'll see that my scene just moves around much more quickly. So I can easily turn that back on, and again we caught some lagginess there. So I'm going to name this layer to house details, and we'll make this a blue layer. Right, so I can turn that on and off now. We'll set my porch to my two porches to their own layer. So I'm going to name this layer porches. So now I can really easily turn those on and off now as well. So now if I want to come in here and start painting some of those rocks in my scene, so we'll go to our mesh network and go to the placer here. You see that that's reacting much faster now because it's not loading all of those other objects in my scene along with it. So we can place some of those much quicker now. If I want to switch to like my nudge tool, you see that will react much quicker. And my delete. It's still a tad laggy, but just not having all those other objects in your scene will make things go much quicker. So I'm going to spend some time just sort of placing my rocks around the edge of my scene, and maybe even put some in the around the house, and then we'll pick up from there and get on to maybe creating some trees and shrubs and things like that.